Welcome to Raising Eight, the podcast that proves a full house is more than just a TV show. Meet the dad who's raised 8 kids and 2 grandkids under one roof and has the scars and dad jokes to show for it. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk family, big family.
Good afternoon, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. Today, Raising Eight, episode 5, we're going to do. And I have to be honest with you, I really thought about not doing this podcast today. Earlier in the week, I had it scheduled for today. And then after the events of yesterday, and then today being 9/11, I wasn't thinking about that. I thought maybe it's just not a good day to do it. Not that my podcast is going to overshadow anything that happened yesterday or 9/11. But then I started thinking about it, and I said, this is kind of the epitome of being a father, right? We have to do things sometimes that we really don't want to do. There's days you wake up, you don't want to be a dad. You're like, I don't want to do a parenting thing. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to go do anything. And so it all kind of ties in, and I'll show you how I'm going to tie that in. This morning when I got up to go to the gym at 3:30 in the morning, actually I woke up at 3 and I couldn't go back to sleep. Listen, I did not want to go. I was tired. My body was sore from the other day. When you get older, you'll understand the recovery time takes a little bit longer to get done. But I went anyway, and I fought through it, and we're going to get through this podcast in the same fashion. So the last podcast was kind of about generational discipline. And I want to reiterate to you again, young fathers or future fathers or, any father out there, that I am not a perfect father by any means. I made a lot of mistakes. I had a lot of issues. I did, you've heard about my relationship issues and things like that. But we've gotten to the point now in this podcast series that I'm getting much more stable. So I've met my current wife at this point, and when we started, she wrote me this little note that I need to read. When we started dating, we had a 2-year-old, a 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and a 12-year-old. 8 kids. Now, only 3 kids lived with me, 2 kids lived with her, and my other 3 older kids lived with their mother in Hemet, which it's if you don't know the area, it's about an hour north of where I'm at. No, I'm sorry, they didn't live in Hemet yet. They lived close by. They moved there later, but I was able to see them as much as possible. My job situation was improving, and I again did not have any interest in getting married. I think my wife did at the time, but she understood my distaste for marriage at that time, seeing how I failed twice. So as a father now, I'm Mr. Organized, right? I got to get everybody going in the same direction. I've got to take over, those guy responsibilities, if you want to call them that. Moms are doing what mom's doing, dad's doing what dad's doing. And I'm having to get them to school and thing. It's funny, when we first met, the way I was dressing my kids was I kind of dressed them like little surfers, like little tomboys. They had Vans and jeans and a t-shirt or whatever on. And, I had to do their hair and I had to do all that stuff. And I was doing okay with the hair, I think. And I got to, once I met my wife, and once she started getting involved more and more, she got them dressing more like girls. So that was kind of just one of these funny things that a guy would do. Although I could dress myself fashionably, I used to wear a suit and tie to work every day. I know that looks surprising now. Not so much with the girls. So she helped me kind of get that squared away. So this is 1999. Now we're moving into the 2000s now, and I get this killer job. It's not far away. It's flexible. I can get the kids when I need to. I can make the events, things like that are happening. And things are really getting stable for both my wife and I. And we decided we wanted to get married in a Catholic church. Now, she wasn't a Catholic, so she had to become a Catholic, and I was never confirmed. So we both went to RCIA, which is like catechism for adults. And we went through that whole process. And then we had to get annulments to get our marriage blessed in the Catholic Church, which we did. We hadn't gotten married yet. We got married in the Catholic Church. So now we're up to 2003, right? This is a year that her and I got married. The kids are doing fine. She's getting along with all my children. I get along with her children. At that point, the kids are starting not to go to their other parents all the time, only because of birthday parties or, there might be a sport or something like that that they needed to stay with us. So we had the timing while we were dating most of the time where the kids would go to the other parent. And so we had some time on the weekends to do whatever adults do, kind of have some adult time. So one of the dangers of being a parent, mother or father, is you have to deal with society. Now, 9/11 happened while I had kids, before I got married to my current wife. We were together, and these are those things that happen in society that you have to explain to your kids. Now, I'm not a political person. I have political opinions, but I do not put those political opinions out there very often. It's very rare that I'll even talk about politics in my personal life, even with other people. I just don't do it. But understand that they're getting society's ideas could be more liberal than mine or more conservative than me. It could be things they're hearing on the news, things they're discussing in school in social studies or history or things like that. And as a parent, you kind of have to assimilate that information that they're gathering and then bring them back down to earth if it's something that's way off of what you believe. Now, we know, and historically we've seen in schools where, they may talk, especially these days, they may talk about things that you really don't want your kids to be talking about. It's none of the teacher's business about our house business and vice versa. So this is one of those hard things you have to manage. And as a dad, my thought to that was we need to communicate a lot because if you hear something, I don't want you going out the door with the wrong opinion, or I guess I should say a different opinion, and that's a little bit controlling of me to say that, but it's the reality. When your kids are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, you're trying to, you have them on a track. We're taking them to church every Sunday. We're going to Catholic church, very conservative, and then they're hearing things from outside that that are that contradict what we're telling them. So now we have to, I don't know if convince is the word, but we have to at least talk to them about it and tell them why we believe what we believe. Now, I've said before, I think I said before, we would have dinner every night. Now, most of the time it was just the five kids. It wasn't my other kids were living with their mom. And we would have these dinners and these long conversations after dinner, especially on the weekends when my kids were there, but bigger kids, just about anything you can imagine. How was your day at school? How was the week at school? And we would do some exercises sometimes, which sounds kind of goofy. But I remember this one exercise we did that just brought tears to my eyes. And we went around the table and we asked every child to say something good about the other children and us too, I think, as parents. And it was amazing to me how kind they were and how complimentary they were. Now, listen, they didn't get along every 5 minutes. There was definitely stuff going on. And I was usually the last one to know. Um, when those girl things took place, right? The uh, physical girl things, I just frankly, I just didn't want anything to do with it. My wife was handling that, and she was doing a great job with that. Um, and that's just a guy thing. I mean, that was not in my wheelhouse for sure. Didn't have to deal with it. And funny enough, so my son lived with his mother almost his entire childhood, right? So I'd have him on the weekend. So I wasn't really as involved as I would have liked to be with a boy because he was with his mom and he was playing sports. And I would help. I was an assistant coach for his football team. I would help him out with different things. I was not a good coach. I was hard on him, harder than every other kid. He was so good at the sport that we were involved in. I was just really hard on him, and I think it made him better. But I don't think he liked me very much during that time. I mean, he actually cried a couple times at football practice, and that was um, my personality that did that. And it was worth. I mean, at this point, looking back, it was not. There was no value to me being so hard on him. I should have just let him have more fun. I did coach the girls a little bit, but I was much more hands off, and I didn't make any of my daughters cry, so that was good. So at some point, and I'm going to be jumping around a little bit here because I just got to go by my memory. At one point, we had five daughters in four sports. So we were, on the weekends and then after school, sometimes we were traveling around taking them to practices and this and that. And so, like I said, I had a really good job that I was in sales, so I had a lot of flexibility, and I was able to get them to those sports. So as we're moving to grade school, I don't really have any issues with anybody in grade school. All the kids are behaving well. They're getting decent grades. I was not a big, I didn't worry about their grades much. I was more interested in them participating and, trying, right? Trying the best, doing the best they can. Never really, I'm not a college educated person. You probably couldn't tell. Just kidding. You can tell. And it wasn't something when we were kids, it was important. So we didn't harp on college and things like that. Now, some of my kids went to college, and we'll get to that in a bit, but it just wasn't my priority. I was much more interested in their ability to adapt, overcome, be creative, things like that. So I encouraged them in that way. And they were performing. They were all doing great. So as I said, our youngest was 2 and the oldest was 12. When my oldest daughter got was ready to go to high school, she asked her mother to she could come down here and live with me and go to Poway High School. So then they were in Hemet at that time. And I had to go to court, like the 20 other times I had to go to court with her about that. And she ended up coming and living with us to go to Poway High School. Now, my oldest daughter, and I'm not going to go through each one and tell you what they did right or wrong, but she was very much a joiner. She would get involved at school. She played sports. She was on the yearbook. She did some other things. So she was pretty athletic, and she played softball when she was younger, and then played basketball in high school. And I never really had to worry about her. There's just no issue with her. So when you have a child like that, you figure all the rest are going to be that way. That's not true. I told you before, all your kids are going to be they're going to be different. That you can tell them the same thing every day, and they're still um, they're going to do different things. It's a weird phenomenon, actually. One of the things that my wife and I had talked about, besides our relationship expectations and our, how we handled things and this and that, which that 4 years, although she kids about that 4 years of dating, it was gold in my mind because we still have as good as or better relationship than we had when we first met because we did talk about those expectations. We did a good job planning out our relationship, if you will. But one of the things that's interesting is if you do a traditional, you date, you get married, you have kids, your relationship is vital to your success. I've talked about this before. The better your relationship with your spouse, the easier it is to raise kids. And they see that and they respond to that. They respond to that positivity. If you're consistent with discipline and they know they're going to get it from one, I remember I used to go, I'd ask my mom for something and she'd say no, and I'd go ask my dad. And when they found out I did that, it was almost like a rocket ship going to the ceiling of the house. You did not do that in my house. If one parent said no, that was no. But my dad would do this to me. Oh, go ask your mother. And that was always great, right? And she'd say, well, ask your father. I said, he told me to ask you. And then whatever ensued from that. They wouldn't argue about it, but it was always a funny thing if they told me to ask each other. So something we did is I said, look, what I think we need to do is if we have a problem with your kids, you need to take care of it first. That has to be your priority, not me. And vice versa. My kids had to be my priority because there were going to be times when I had to deal with my kids, with my exes, for instance, and it was none of my wife's business. And now I would tell her, of course, it was what was going on, but I didn't need another person in that relationship. So if I was having, some kind of dispute or something with my ex-wife, I didn't need her in a relationship. And same backwards with her. She wasn't on great terms with her husband either, or ex-husband either. So when those things came up, we kind of had to separate our relationship out, take care of the problems, and then come back together as one. But we had to be consistent with the kids on how we were going to deal with whatever trouble, if they got in any trouble, they would get in. For the most part, out of 8 kids, I'm super happy and proud. I'm proud of all my kids, no matter where they're at in life right now and what they did. And you're going to have these moments. I mean, this is where being a father is just the most amazing thing in the world. When your daughter gets her first hit, or they're in a school play, or there's 100 things they did that made me so proud that would just choke me up because I'm like, yeah, that's my kids. They're just doing an awesome job. Or when people say that they're good kids at school or teachers, that's just that source of pride that's irreplaceable. It's the best feeling in the world when your kids are rock stars and you get to get told that. Uh, Conversely, sometimes you get told that your kids are not rock stars and things happen and you have to go to the school and deal with it. If I did something wrong in school when I was a kid and I was guilty of doing that thing wrong, my parents had no sympathy, no empathy. I was going to get hammered for whatever reason, for whatever I did or didn't do. We did the same thing with our kids. If there was I had one child that cheated on a test when she was in elementary school. In this school district where we're at, other school districts around, if you cheat on a test in fifth grade, for instance, and in eighth grade you cheat on a test again, that follows you. So you have this school record that shows that you've had these two improprieties, and one more can get you kicked out of school. And there was no getting around that. If you had done that and you did it again the third time, now I didn't have any kids that did it three times. I had one kid that did it twice. And I had some issues with her later, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I'm not going to name names in here or even the order kids because I'm not here to embarrass my kids. I'm just telling you that as your kids start growing up, they're going to get faced with things that you probably got faced with things when you were kids. Sometimes my kids gave into them and sometimes they didn't. And I don't like the excuse, well, they're kids, they're going to get in. I don't really like that excuse. Something I wanted to say in this beginning of this podcast, I didn't. I did that last podcast about discipline last Friday. My wife and I rarely go out to dinner. Like, I mean, if we go once every 2 years, I'd be surprised. We just are not going out to dinner people. My wife can make anything a restaurant can make as good or better for less money. And we went out to this restaurant. She had a gift card from a gift she got from work. And there was two families in there. One family was on their way out, and their kids were running around like banshees. And they were little kids, maybe 3 to 6 or 7 years old. I really wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention to their behavior, but not their ages. The next family that came in were like little banshees. They were letting them run around, crawl on the floor, do all these things. This is something that we never let our kids do when they were little, not in a restaurant. I'd take them to a park and let them run crazy, but not in a restaurant, not in church, not in places that they needed to behave well. And in my opinion, if you let your kids do that when they're little and you just say, they're kids, they can crawl all over things, you're going to have problems with those kids because you've already got a discipline problem. If I told my kids to stop, they stopped right away. I didn't have to punch them. I didn't have to hit them. I didn't have to spank them. I just told them to stop. And they knew I was being serious. They stopped right then. We would get kids that would talk in church once in a while, and I'd snap my fingers and point at them, and they'd stop talking. It's not the place to do it. You got to teach your kids when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. Like I said, you want to get in the swimming pool and scream and yell and do whatever. That's fine. That's what you're supposed to do in a swimming pool or at the park. But you don't do that in school. You don't do that at church. You don't do that at restaurants. But they see other kids doing it, and this is where those discussions, and this is where the dad vibe for me comes in, where I got to go, hey, we don't do that. I don't have the indoor voices crap. We don't do any of that stuff. It's the wrong generation. I just tell them you got to stop doing that. You don't act like that where we're at right now. And I would talk to them, pull them to the side later, and tell them, look, you don't ever do that again. Don't ever act like that. It was rare that my kids ever talked back to me. I can think of two times right now that my kids talked back to me. And ironically, those are the two grandkids I'm taking care of. So I'm not going to get super into that because it's not fair to them for me to give one side of the story. But I am raising two grandkids, and it's just, we'll call it ironic or coincidental that those are two kids that I had a little bit of friction with. And it wasn't, one of them was school age and one of them was after school, after high school. So, by the way, saying that, I remember hearing a woman say to me, a girl, kid, I can't wait to have this child. I'm going to raise them all the way up to they're 18. Yeah, well, good luck because you're going to raise them till they're 40 or 50. I still am my kids' parents. I have a daughter that's only almost 39 years old. And I still tend to parent her at times. And sometimes she wants it, sometimes she might not. You're always your kids' parents. And it doesn't go away. My daughter, I mean, my wife talks to her kids, a couple times a week, 4 or 5 times a week, even more than that, I think sometimes. And I love that. I talked to my mom when I was an adult and my stepdad, I did that a lot. So some of the things that happened when these kids were teenagers, like I said, for the most part, they were all good kids at school. I didn't have a lot of, I didn't get a lot of calls from school that we were having problems with kids. But there were times on weekends, for instance, maybe they were supposed to be somewhere and we would get a call. And the worst stomach dropping, gut wrenching thing that can ever happen to a parent is when they get a call after your phone rings after 10 o'clock at night, it's usually a problem. And your gut would just drop. One night we get a call and it's my daughter, and she is with the police at someone's house. She gives me the address. I think the cop got on the phone, or he might have called us, and I got to go get her. It's 3 in the morning. We drive up. I got me and my wife are in the car. We drive up, and here's about 6 or 8 kids sitting on the curb, and there's a cop there, right? Maybe two, maybe one. And I get out of the car. He says, this is Mr. Franklin. Da, 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 da. We shake hands. He says, well, your daughter was caught at this house with alcohol, and all these kids were drinking. And shows me the alcohol. It wasn't mine. I don't know where she got it. And we're going to let you take her home. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to let you take her home. And um, and I'm pissed. Right, it's 3 in the morning. I'm not happy. Thank God she's safe. But I'm just not happy about the situation. So the cop looks at me and says, see that kid up there standing in the garage way? There was a garage door was open and he was standing away. He's the one that's old enough to get the booze, and he's the one that did something or got him the alcohol. Of course, my daughter's on the hook. It's her fault. She shouldn't have been in that situation. Shouldn't have got herself in that situation. She goes, I'm gonna go let you talk to him, but I don't want to take you to jail tonight, so make sure you keep it okay. So I walk up to this kid and I talk to him a little bit, and he's just one of these, he's a wise ass, right? He's not going to listen to me to whatever I say. So I'm done with him and I'm walking back to the truck. I got my daughter in the car at this point, and he follows me down to the sidewalk, and the cop says to him, okay, now, since I told you to stay in your yard and I didn't let you go up there, I let him come up there and he left. Now I'm going to turn my back, and if he wants to do something to you, I'm going to let him do it. Now, of course, the cop is being facetious, but this kid maybe weighs 100 pounds with rocks in his pockets, soaking wet. And of course, nothing happened. The kid I turned around towards him and he walked back up into the house. That's that dad stuff, right? That's where I'm pissed off now. I'm mad. I love my daughter, but I'm not happy with her. I'm not sure how angry my wife was at her, but they tend to handle things a little bit different. Although my wife she could amp out on a kid. There's no doubt about it. But I think in that situation, she was just more happy that she was safe. So we took her home. I'm sure we had some talks with her about that. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. So when I'm talking to the cop, he says, Franklin, Franklin. He says, I know that last name. And he looks at me right in the eye and says, did I arrest your daughter last week? And I said, unfortunately, I think you did, because I have a daughter that decided she wanted to shoplift and she got caught. Now, I'd laugh at this stuff, but it's not funny when it happened. It is zero humor when it happened. Thank God all my kids got through teenagers. Thank God I got to do being a teenager without getting hurt or killed. And as I like I said, it's very funny now, and there's some other ones I'm going to get to. And it wasn't funny at the time. I'm very upset. I'm thinking to myself, every parent, my kids wouldn't do that. Well, guess what? Your kids are going to do some stuff like this, and all you can do is pray that nothing happens to them while they're in this mess. Another instance, we're at home. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock. My wife had gone to a friend's house, and I had had some beers and pizza, and we came home. And I was by no means even buzzed, but I had been drinking. And this police officer comes to our door. Now, my daughter's there and she's green. I mean, she has had so much to drink. And I think she threw up on the lawn a couple times because she was drinking too much. And I thought, good for her. Cough up a lung, throw up something that you're not supposed to throw up. It's your fault. You know better than this. We've had this discussion before. And I can't remember if this is before or after that other instance. But so the cop tells me, well, there was this party at this kid's house and the parents were there, but it went from, 20 kids to 200 kids. I live in an area that close to us is a very wealthy area, and they were out on a tennis court and all this stuff. They were doing all this stuff. I'm leaving for Pittsburgh the next morning for a training week. And the cop says to me, look, you want to follow me over to see this guy? You're happy to follow me. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I've already had a couple beers. I'm pissed off. If I go see this father that should have been keeping an eye on his kids and their household, he wanted to be the cool dad. I said, I'm not going to, and I told the cop, it's not a good idea for me to go with you. I'll contact him, which I did. I actually called him from Pittsburgh and talked to him, and he was just an idiot. I mean, the things he was saying to me, I wanted to punch him through the phone, but I couldn't, obviously. So when I got back the following week, I drove over to his house on my motorcycle. And at the time, I had a chopper, and I looked pretty mean on this chopper when I was all dressed up and everything. And I got to his driveway, and I went, this is a bad idea. Now I'm completely sober, obviously. It's a Sunday. And I just turned around and went home. I'm like, it's not worth dealing with this guy. Uh, I had one daughter that was at the mall, and she wasn't supposed to be at the mall. And I went to get her, and I got to the mall and I found her and I started walking up to her, and one of her friends walks up, some kid, I don't know, a male, and says she doesn't want to go with you. And I'm like, I'm not going to use the language I used, but imagine if you know me, the kind of language I used. I did ask him if he wanted to ride home, but it was in an ambulance. If he wanted to continue on with me, I would give him a ride home that way. And I brought her home, and she was one of the ones that just wanted to give me a grief all the time. And I went home and called her mom. She was living with us at the time. So we had $7 at one time living with us. And told her to come get her because I'm not dealing with her anymore. Um, like I said, with this many kids, we had this many kids, we had very few incidents. Um, we had some kids that got into fights. We had some kids that, caused some trouble in class. We had some kids that did something like that. But a lot of times, and I was speaking to this expert this week, he's going to be on my podcast next week, about how kids will lie to you, usually when they're younger, just to see if they can get away with it. And there's some psychological reason they do it. And I wouldn't say all my kids tried it, but most of my kids did try that. But in high school, like I said, now you've got some, when I'm dealing with my grandson, the stuff that he comes and tells me now, and from this generation, my eyes roll into the back of my head. I don't understand the kids with the nail polish, with the earrings. When I was a kid, nobody had an earring unless you were a bike or a tattoo, unless you were a biker or something like that. I have a lot of tattoos, but I didn't get my first tattoo till I was 48 years old. My daughters wanted to get piercings when they were teenagers, and I said, you know what? I'll allow the piercings, like in your ears, if you want to get your ears pierced a couple times, or a nose ring or whatever, but no tattoos because you can take the earring out. And it's funny that a couple of them that got the earring, got the nose, things or whatever, when they got jobs, they had to take them out because back then, you could tell them they couldn't wear that stuff. I don't think you can do that now. I don't even know if HR, allows you in California to do that. So I know that you probably thought I had a lot more teenage, and I'm not done yet, by the way. But for as many kids as I had, we kind of had society, right? We had some really high performers, some really people that were struggling, and then some people that were, right in the middle there. And I'm sure I had some kids that had learning disabilities, and I think that one of my daughters, I probably started her in school too early. And we don't know. We're trying to do our best to, be psychologists and doctors and cooks and maids and, yard care people and do all those things. We're doing our best to cover all our bases. Remember, there's no book on parenting. And then society gets in there and tells them that you're wrong, right? This happens on a regular basis, especially with this generation. Thank God my granddaughter that we're raising is in a Christian school, so a lot more conservative values, right? We don't have as many dress issues. Speaking of dress codes, when my kids were in high school, my daughters, they had a dress code. You couldn't wear spaghetti straps. Your shorts had to be a certain length. Skirts had to be a certain length. And more than once, one of my daughters would take clothes with her in her backpack. I never checked their backpacks in the morning and would go to school and change in the bathroom. And I'd get a call. Inevitably, I'd get a call that says, hey, this daughter is dressed inappropriately. And they would give him this really big t-shirt to wear over. I had a couple that wore spaghetti straps. Maybe they had a sweater on or a sweatshirt when they left for school. Take their sweatshirt off because it gets hot, and boom, they get nailed, and I have to go up there. I never, no school that my kids went to wanted me to come to school because I was going to protect them first. And if I found that it was on them, I was going to hammer them too. And they knew that. They better be telling me the truth when I get up there. I had one teacher that accused my daughter of stealing a camera or something, and I lit this guy up because the way he handled it was the wrong way to handle it. And all he did is hurt my daughter's feelings, and it wasn't fair to her. Looking back, I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do because this daughter had some other improprieties. So maybe she pulled the wool over my eyes. I don't know. And I'm sure that if I got all the kids in a room, they would tell me stuff that I don't want to hear. I've had kids sneak out at night. I've had kids go and do things. I came home one day, the rules at our household were no guys upstairs, right? No guys can go upstairs. So you can hang out down at the pool, they can hang out in the living room, they can do all that. No guys upstairs in your room. Came home one day, my daughter's home and the door's locked, which was kind of strange because she was by herself. And I opened the door and went in, I went up, changed clothes or something. And I said, why was the door locked? She says, I was wrapping Christmas presents. I said, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything? Some guy's going to walk down the street and go, oh, yeah, I bet that girl's wrapping Christmas. I don't know why you locked the door. So I leave the house. I get about 5 minutes away. I'm like, she's lying to me. I could tell there's something going on. And by the way, you're gonna learn when your kids lie to you, and they think they're really good at it. They're not very good at it. By the way, so I turn around. I go home. I walk upstairs. I walk into her room, and here's a guy sitting on the floor. So, it was weird because there was a car out front when I got there. I wasn't really paying attention to it. So I told him, "Get out of here. You're gone." And he stands up and he kind of squares off with me. And again, there's always these midgets that want to fight me. And I'm like, you don't want to do this, pal. You're not going to like the end results. So he leaves. So I go downstairs, get her two black trash bags and bring them up and say, pack your shit. You're out of here. I kicked out just about every kid out of our house at some point when they started acting like they got too big for their britches, as my mom would say. And they didn't think I would kick them out, and I did. I didn't kick them all out, but there's a few of them that had to go. I just said, nope, you want to be an adult? Move out. Go find a place to live. And even though they were girls, I figured they would figure out a way. Um, I haven't even got into the boys, into the dating yet. That's a whole nother. Good Lord! Wait till you see some of the kids that come over to pick up your kids, pick up your daughters. We had rules. My dad had rules about how I treated girls' parents and things like that. I never would take a girl out unless I went and met her dad and mom. And I did. I was good at it. I mean, I would go and meet their mom and dad and let them know what we were doing. My dad says, if you say you're going to be home at 11, be home at 10:30, kind of thing. And I was always respectful to those girls and their parents. And that was kind of how we grew up. I wanted the same thing for my daughters. And I had a couple kids come up and honk the horn outside. And I said, nope, 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 nope. Go get that kid and bring him in the house. He's going to look me in the eye. Now, looking back and forward at the same time, one, two, three of the kids married those kids that I had to meet the first time, two or three. My oldest daughter, got into a relationship that didn't work out. She actually left California, and it didn't work out. And she's got a great relationship now. She's been married several years, and all that. And that was one of those "I told you so" moments. When you meet guys or whatever that they're not going to be, you know, that they're not going to work out. And thank God for my size and my attitude about things, because I think we probably diverted some real assholes that could have dated my kids because they didn't want to. The old joke was, "Hey, did you meet Big Ed yet? Because you got to meet him before you can take his daughter out." Now, of course, some of these things happened before the first date. They would go out and hang out with them and this and that. And a couple of them, they snuck out of the house to go see. And you know what? I did this bullshit too. I snuck out of my listen. I got actually, let me back up. I never snuck out of my house. I snuck out of my friend's house because if my dad would have caught me sneaking out, I would have got that beating like I got for the throwing the football at the car. So I guess I'm going to end this podcast. I'm going to come up with some more teenage stories because I know I got a couple more that are really good. So now we're at a couple of arrests, a couple of drinking situations. Just so you know, that kid that got caught drinking is a teetotaler now, doesn't hardly drink at all. Um, and none of my kids were really big drinkers. Even now, it's very rare that when I see them that they're even drinking at all. So it wasn't something that held on to them. But I got some more stories. I guess the lesson here is that it doesn't matter how many kids you have, you have to fight society. I can't even imagine fighting social media as a parent today. We didn't have social media when my kids were young. So we didn't have the bullying. We didn't have some of the nasty stuff that's on social media. This thing that happened yesterday, how they put the video right on social media, and it's X-rated at best. I have not watched it. I will not watch it. It's just this is what our kids are exposed to. These fighting on social media. I didn't have to deal with that. You kids these days that are having kids are going to have your hands full with all this social media stuff. The bullying really pisses me off because we had some kids that were getting bullied at times, and we had to nip it. I got bullied as a kid, and I was a bully too in elementary school sometimes. But now with this social media, with all this technology, you're up against something crazy. And I didn't have to deal with that. So for the most part, we had a very consistent, kind of a boring life. We did a lot of things together. We camped, we surfed, we rode bikes, we did, as a family, I had a trailer at one time. I had a trailer for bikes at one time. We would all go. do things together, go to the park, go to games, do whatever. And it was really going swell. Once society and the kids started getting older, it definitely peppered some problems into our life, which there's no way I could have avoided those things. You know, I know parents and families that have these straight-laced kids, and they're still to this point, and they're probably always going to be that way. I don't know what they did different. It's probably a small percentage. There's always a person, right? You have a meeting, you're in a group of people, there's always that person. Well, when you have this many kids, there's always a kid that's going to do some things. In my case, there was a few kids that did a few things isolated here and there. And it's just parenting. Like I said, thank God no one got hurt. You know, um, they did test the waters a little bit. And, you know, like I said, I probably don't even know half the stuff they even did. My parents don't know half the stuff I did either. I didn't do anything illegal, but I was doing stuff that was dangerous. There's no doubt about it. And so thank God we all get through it. It's just, as a dad, I spent a lot of sleepless nights worrying about my children. Yeah, but my daughter lives in New Orleans. When she goes to Florida, I worry about her the whole weekend that she gets back safe. And I usually text her once or twice there, which probably bugs the crap out of her, but I do it anyway because I'm a dad and I get to do that. But, going from thank God for my wife, because if I would not, I don't know what would have happened. If I hadn't met her, I would have been a single dad longer, or I may have ended up with somebody less desirable. It might have been another failed relationship. My wife has put up with my 8 kids bullshit because I have a few that bullshit. Her kids, I didn't really have an issue with them. And it just got to the point where I was kind of their dad. We didn't even say stepdaughters anymore because their dad wasn't around as much. And he appreciates what I did and has told me that I stepped up and, we got her in soccer. We got one in soccer, one in lacrosse. Um, but we'll talk about, like I said, the next episode. And I think this thing's going to continue because I have some guests that we're going to kind of backtrack on some areas that are going to dig deeper into them that are going to be beneficial for future dads or new dads. But I'm going to have people on that have credentials that are going to talk about this. And since I started this podcast, I've been getting a lot of people that want to become guests on the podcast, not just for the Raising Eight, but for my regular podcast. So stay tuned. A lot of good stuff coming up. Look, I really appreciate you doing this. And again, I'm not here being your dad. I'm not here to berate you and say you're doing things wrong in 2025 because I don't even know if I can handle being a parent in 2025. I know there's days you wake up and you don't want to parent, but you gotta. I know there's days you wanted to go golfing and your daughter's son are sick and you got to stay home. These are those sacrifices we make for our kids. But the amount of pride you're going to get from the things that they accomplish, is going to blow you away. And it's the best decision I ever made was having children and marrying my wife. Those two things, because I found myself in a really good relationship. I get along fine with my ex-wives now. The kids, and then they have other families, so they have this network of kids. I call them kids. This network of my kids, their kids, her kids, and they all get along, and they're all friends on social media. And I mean, sometimes I see things get a little hinky, but that's just most of the time it's girl stuff, in my opinion. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you, listen, I have the roadmap to be a father. I don't. I had to learn just like you. I tell you one more story, and this is something I did, and I've done this more than once. I'm at breakfast one day. I think I was having, I don't know, I was eating some breakfast, and the kids were filtering down from upstairs. And one of my daughters came down, and she was not dressed appropriately. Like, she wasn't dressed like a hooker. She just, she had the spaghetti straps. I think the shorts were too short. And I knew she was going to get dress coded. And I said, I almost said her name. I said, get your ass back upstairs and get changed. You can't go to school like that. And it upset her, and she ran back upstairs, got dressed, and probably started crying. So we get in a big tough dad, right? Just yelled at a little girl. Well, she wasn't little, she was in high school. And I've thought about that a lot of times in my life and said, I could have handled that 100 different ways. I could have said, you know what, Paige? Unfortunately, when you get to school, you're going to get dress coded and you're so pretty. Why do you have to show, why do you have to show off all that stuff? You can just, wear something really nice and you're so beautiful. Just go upstairs and change real quick. I'll wait for you. Then we'll get you to school. That's the way I could have handled it. I know that you know, passive kind of discipline doesn't always work, but it works more than yelling at the kid. And I'm guilty of doing that before, many times. Listen, I'm high strung, controlling kind of guy, and when I'm trying to get 8 people organized to go in the same direction, and I got one or two kids that are messing around or whatever, I don't have time for it. And there's definitely times where I could have handled things differently. I didn't need to yell, but it happened, and I learned from it, and I hopefully they learned from it as parents. And all my kids now have children. Every one of my kids has a child. We have 20 grandchildren. And I hope they learned from me in good and bad ways. And I hope that you do too. New dads, like I said, or dads that have little kids right now, or maybe a dad that has kids my age can try to understand a little bit better that he could have done a better job. And maybe it's a discussion to have with your kids about the way they're raising their kids. I don't know. Anyway, edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of me. That's edfranklin.nolimits at gmail.com. This is episode 5 of Raising 8, and I will have another episode next week. Not sure we're going to go, but it'll be worth listening to, I promise you. So, y'all have a fantastic day and a great weekend. Talk to you soon.